You're muted, Doug.
What?
I said you were muted.
Well, I don't have on a shirt like Johanna's, but my mic is working, Bruce.
Okay,
Here.
Mr. Marshall, let's see. Amherst Media is with us. You are the co-host to this meeting. We have several attendees who have joined us. And the attendees, you have a full board available tonight. The time, according to me, is 6:39. I think you're good to go.
All right. Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of September 3, 2025. My name is Doug Marshall, and as chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:36 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, and further extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this Planning Board meeting will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is available on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting. Or go to the Planning Board webpage and click on the most recent agenda where the Zoom link is listed at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event public access is disrupted for reasons of economic hardship or despite our best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Colden.
I'm here.
Fred Hartwell.
I am here.
Jesse Major.
Present.
I, Doug Marshall, am present. Angus McLeod.
Present.
Johanna Newman.
I'm here.
And Jara Smith.
There he is.
Hello, Jara. We are not, I'm hearing a little bit of audio clicking, but I'm not hearing your voice. So I will assume you are present, but you might want to work on your microphone. Board members, if technical issues arise and the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment, and I will call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the general public. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate by the planning board chair. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address, and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. Okay, I now have 6:39 and we'll go into the first item on our agenda, which is approval of minutes. We had the June 18th minutes in our packet for approval. Did anyone have any comments on those minutes? Bruce?
Yes, in the section on general housing, or at least the general housing, but it's a discussion of the North Amherst overlay, was a lengthy discussion reported. And item number 13 in board comments says the owner of Puffton Village is interested in this overlay. And I think that was probably reported of something I said because I had spoken to the owner. But I think that might overstate or perhaps be misinterpreted. I think it might be better to say that the owner of Puffton Village is aware of our interest in this overlay initiative. Or you could say they're curious. But interest implies, although it doesn't need to, but it kind of implies a positive disposition. And I think that wouldn't be an accurate interpretation of Barbara Puffton's of the short conversation that she and I had.
Okay, all right. Thank
Got
you,
it.
Bruce.
So noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone else on the board? All right, Jesse,
I would move to accept the minutes with that one change.
okay. Johanna,
I'll second the motion.
all right, thank you both. Any further comment? All right, we'll go on right into our vote to accept the minutes, starting with you, Bruce,
Aye.
and Fred,
Aye.
Angus,
Abstain.
and Jesse,
Aye.
Johanna,
Aye.
and Jara.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. That's 6 in favor, 1 abstention. Thank you all. All right, we'll go right into the second item on the agenda, which is our public comment period. And as I stated before, this is where you get to make comments about items that don't show up later in the agenda. So at the moment, at this time, I usually read the names of the public attendees that I can see, and I will do that. So while I'm doing that, if any of the attendees want to make a comment, now is the time to raise your hand. So there are 3 public attendees, Elizabeth Veerling, Howard Ewert, and Maura Keene. And I still don't see any of them wanting to raise their hand. I'll linger another minute, another second or two to give you one last chance. Okay, I guess we have no public comment for this meeting. All right, with that, we'll go into the third item on the agenda, which is our public hearing. The time is, according to my clock, 6:43 rather. This is a public hearing for a zoning amendment. It was advertised for 6:35, so we have passed that time. It's a zoning bylaw concerning Article 5, accessory uses. It is continued from August 6th and August 20th of this year. And the preamble is to consider amending the zoning bylaw by rescinding section 5.011, accessory dwelling units, as amended October 18th, 2021, and effective November 1st, 2021, and replacing it with a new section 5.011 that includes provisions for a local ADU and for the protected use ADU, which are permitted by right in accordance with the Affordable Homes Act. All right, board members, any disclosures that we ought to be aware of for this conversation? Okay. And Nate, I know Johanna missed the last couple of meetings, so is she eligible to vote on this evening?
She is. This isn't the type of hearing where if you miss more than one, you can't vote. So she can vote if she feels comfortable.
Okay. All right. Nate, you had sent around a new markup of that, I think, today. Should we dive right in?
Yeah, I can just give a recap. So I've been going to the planning board and CRC with this, and I told the CRC last week I was going to get the board, the planning board to a vote tonight. So that's where we are. I think what it comes down to is I think it was before the CRC meeting. I forget if it was before the last planning board meeting. Anyways, the state's ruled that we have to use gross floor area when we define the square footage for an ADU. So we had been defining it a little bit differently. And the Attorney General, West Hampton, and another community tried it, and they made a decision just last week and said, no, you really have to use what the state regulations are. So, we can no longer say habitable space for a protected ADU. So it has to say gross floor area and use the definition provided by the state, which is not what we wanted to do because it doesn't really accurately reflect building code or how we would measure it typically. So whatever, that's something we have to do. And then I guess the bigger question is, do we like the idea of 2 ADUs or 1 protected use ADU? So the CRC, kind of like the planning board last time, they said, well, they looked at the one with both because really they're supposed to be, the same language, except for the bylaw, the amendment that has 2 ADUs offers a local definition and some other requirements for a local ADU. But in terms of the language, it should really be, a mirror image of each other. And so, there are some discussions about the benefits of having both. I think the one point to be made is that, if you allow a local ADU, the permitting for it is different depending on if there's a protected use already on the property. So if the local ADU comes first, we're saying it would be through administrative approval according to the bylaw. So the building commissioner and staff would approve it, could put conditions on it, could use some site plan review criteria, but it doesn't go to through a land use permitting process with a board. However, if a protected ADU is on the property first, by state law and regulation, a second ADU has to be by special permit. So the local ADU in that instance would be by special permit. And so, it's a little different permitting path. I think we discussed that. We have a provision that a local ADU has an owner occupancy requirement on the property. And the attorneys for KP Law that we work with feel strongly that if someone did a local ADU first, and then they did a protected, that, that owner occupancy could remain on the property. But it's unclear, if someone really wanted to push this issue, it would probably become a legal case, right? Because that hasn't been clarified yet by the Attorney General. So, the KP Law attorneys say, well, there's other precedent, case law precedent where you can't have a future decision wipe out a previous permit. And so, there's so many cases where someone would then say, well, I had a special permit, but now I can do this one thing and I can nullify the whole special permit. And typically case law and state land use law doesn't work that way. So, the CRC, made some changes to the language, some tweaks. So there was one version that was in your packet. And what I sent today was really for the 2 types of ADUs. And I'll share my screen in a minute. Was, we were still defining a local ADU and measuring it through habitable space. And the CRC said, well, why don't we just use gross floor area and just have the same kind of metric as a protected ADU? It just seems strange to have one being gross floor area and one being habitable space. And so if we do that, the only issue is, and it's a big one, is that gross floor area as defined by the state includes basements, unfinished basements of building code height. So so if you have a 500 square foot footprint and you have a 500 square foot basement and a 500 square foot living space, you're at 1,000 square feet according to the definition of gross floor area, and you're too big for a protected use ADU. And so what we've tried to do is, if we're keeping the 2, use gross floor area for local ADU, say up to 1,200 square feet of gross floor area, and then in the requirements for local ADU, say something that an unfinished basement does not count towards gross floor area. Because we, from the building commissioner standpoint, allowing basements is not a big deal. It's actually something we've done in the past, and it's really a good place to have utilities. They still could do a slab, they could do a crawl space. But it's just an odd, to me, it's an odd thing to say an unfinished basement counts towards gross floor area. And so the reality is this applies to protected use ADUs. So if we say that a protected use ADU is 900 square feet, that will include an unfinished basement. And so what it really forces an applicant to do is to either do a crawl space or a slab. And if it's a slab, 900 gross square feet doesn't include, utility closets or other things that where you might have to have your water heater and some other infrastructure for the unit. So really your habitable space or your living space is going to be smaller than 900 square feet, whether it's 100 square feet smaller or whatever. And so the CRC was asking about that, and they're asking questions like, okay, with gross floor area, what does it mean with an attic? And what does it mean with this? And there's a lot of variables. It's hard to capture them all. So really gross floor area is now the metric we're using to calculate the square feet of a protected ADU. And I'm recommending in the version I just emailed also of the local ADU if we keep that option. And it's just a different way to calculate it. And so, attics are not included, but at some point, if, according to building code, if so much of your attic is finished and it has a certain ceiling height, then even if it's a finished attic, it's considered an attic. But if you get over a certain percentage of the attic space, it's no longer considered an attic. It's considered gross, habitable space and would count towards gross floor area. So, there's all these little variables to determine what's the right, measurement, what's the right size. I'm saying that because I think, if we wanted to just have one, I think if we said 1,000 square feet for a protected ADU and its gross floor area, that would still probably net us about 900 square feet of habitable space. And so, if we just kept it at 900, what the state says, you're actually going to probably have smaller units. And what we've found over time is that, certain applicants and households and property owners want to have a little bit bigger ADU, just to have a little bit better living space and, maybe make it visitable or have a bigger bathroom or something. And so, we don't think that the difference in 100 gross square feet is going to necessarily allow 2 more students to live in that unit. If someone thinks they're going to build a 900 gross square feet ADU or 1,000 square foot ADU, they're going to, however many students they want to put in it, they've already, we don't think that 100 square feet is going to make a difference. But I think that's something to consider tonight. And I think the big decision is, do we like having 2 ADUs, knowing there's some differences in the permitting paths and maybe some enforceability of some of the conditions, or do we like having a protected use ADU? And the language, like I said, is pretty similar to both documents, right? I mean, the purpose, the applicability, where it's allowed, none of that really changes. It's just kind of the structure of, if there's 2 ADUs, we have, requirements for both and requirements for specific local and, requirements for the protected. And so I think it's really, the planning board's discretion. I think the language has been clarified in a lot of the conditions. So the CRC made a few, like I said, a few changes. So I think the language is clear for the requirements and all those. And so unless, what I told them is, if we think some of the language isn't clear, I'd like to continue working on it. But if it's a matter of style or something, someone wants to put their voice in it, sure. But if we think something still doesn't make sense, let's talk about it. Because, once it's voted on, then, then it's a bylaw. So if we think some of the requirements, for instance, or definition are still unclear, we can work on that.
Jesse, I do see your hand. I'm gonna take the chair's prerogative and jump right in with Nate with a question about the two permitting paths that you've outlined, particularly in light of Kathy Shane's concerns in one of the meetings we've held about the possibility of getting 2 ADUs on a site. Why wouldn't we require the local ADU by special permit regardless?
Yeah, so we could. I think for 2 reasons. One, I think it's a waste of time to require a special permit when the state's saying you can do it protected by right, which is just a building permit application. So,
well, but then they can do a protected if they want to go through the. I mean, I just think it would be, if we allow a local ADU first by administrative review, the path to having 2 ADUs on one site is very easy.
It is, yes.
And it seems like, I mean, I'm probably okay with that, but I think there are some people who wouldn't be. And so maybe I should just ask, did anybody on CRC have any problems with that?
Yeah, I think there was a discussion about, well, if the owner occupancy requirement, can stand, then you have an owner occupied unit on the property. And there's still some questions about, is this a way to circumvent, not circumvent, but, to add an extra unit? Is that like an unintended consequence? Everyone might think, oh, you're just going to do one or the other. Like, who's really going to do 2 ADUs on a property? But maybe there are a bunch of property owners who think this is a good thing, and all of a sudden they have, they've gone from however many units, 1, 2, 3, 4, to 2 extra. I will say that this bylaw applies to any, the definition of a principal dwelling is any structure with 1 dwelling unit in it. So it's not just a single family home that's now going from 1 to 3 or a duplex from 2 to 4. It could be, a 7-unit building that could go to 7 or 8 or 9. And so the percentage increase in terms of units is smaller, if you have more units in the principal dwelling. But yeah, the CRC, like the planning board is unresolved with this. They like it. They like the 1 version because it's simple. And there was a discussion about having the protected ADU be a little bit bigger, but I think they said, well, why do we want to make that bigger? But I think knowing how we're calculating gross square feet, it's different than our calculation now, and so you're actually getting a smaller living space at 900 gross square feet. So, they kind of went back and forth about what's the benefit. To me, if we're, we thought previously at the last meeting it was unlikely someone would do both, but there could be a likelihood. And
Well,
so
I mean, I could build a second structure on my property that's 2 stories, one of which is a local ADU and one of which is a protected use ADU. And now I've got, 2,000 square feet and 2 stories added onto my property. I mean, I could see people trying to do both at once.
Right, or yeah, it could be one could be contained within the dwelling or attached to it or the principal structure, and one could be detached.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think I said to the planning board and the CRC was that if we're worried about that, let's just do 1. And the idea would be to come back and actually have a definition. To me, it would be, let's actually have a definition for a triplex on a property or 3 units on a property, whether that means, a duplex plus the principal dwelling, and then a quadplex, and then, restructure our use classifications in terms of apartments and other things. So we're not, accidentally, say, allowing, a 1 to a 3 family conversion when really it's just about an ADU. And so I'd rather then think of other ways to allow units on a property, and then we can have it through site plan review or special permit, have a little more consistent permitting.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. All right, we have 4 hands up. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thanks. 1 question and 1 comment. The comment is, I've gone round and round on the 1 versus 2, and what convinced me that the 2 is a good idea was the ability to keep the owner occupancy requirement. That felt pretty significant, because if we just go with the 1 protected use, even if it's bigger and it results in the same size, we can no longer have that at all. My question for you, Nate, is what I haven't heard, and maybe just hasn't come up. Does staff see a downside to having 2? Like, is it just because there's potentially more work? Like, is it significant downsides that we haven't discussed for that option?
To allowing 2 on a property?
No, for having the 2 versions in the bylaw versus just the 1.
No, but I think the way it's written now, if the local came first, it's administrative approval. So there is the ability to say no to that, and so I think if we said, well, let's allow 2, but the local ADU is a special permit anytime it comes through, to me, I think it disincentivizes it. So I don't know how many people are actually going to go through the special permit process. So I would say just remove it, because that's silly, because they would just do a protected ADU. Or if they're going to be an owner-occupied duplex, which is similar, it's a site plan review. And so, we offer different methods in our bylaw to get to the same number of units. And so I don't know why we'd have a local ADU always be by special permit when there's other ways to add a unit on a property that's a different permitting path. And so I would just say, just scrap it and do the protected for now and come up with a better definition of, like I said, a different use class.
Sorry, but the local, the way it's written now, the local is not a special permit, right?
Right, but Doug had just said.
Right, yeah, I understand, sure,
No,
okay.
no.
I got it. Thank you.
All right, Angus.
Yeah, just a question following up on Jesse's question or point about the owner occupancy requirement. So You said if they had the local use first, right, and then did a protected use, the owner occupancy requirement would still be in place for that property.
Well,
Correct.
we're saying yes.
Yeah.
And an attorney for the town says yes.
Yeah.
It's just, one of those things where a protected use ADU, is a section of Mass General Law. So it's a protected use,
Right.
and then they write the stipulation that you in the regulation, so not in the legislation, but in this mass regulation, that you can't have an occupancy requirement on the principal dwelling or the protected ADU. So then, in essence, the local ADU has to become the owner occupied unit on the property. And Rob, the building commissioner, and we've talked about, he's like, well, would that withstand a court case? And so the town attorney said, yeah, a bunch of attorneys think it would, but there's some that might not. And so it's questionable right now. I think it's probably, most people probably would say it would withstand a court case, and then some might not. And it's just it really is gonna have to play out in some community if they have a similar process as Amherst.
Gotcha. And just a quick follow-up. If it was done in reverse order, so if they did a protected use first and then a local use, it would still be, the owner occupancy requirements still be in place for at least the local use ADU.
We would say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, it could be legally questionable, but we would say yes.
Thank you.
All right, Bruce?
Okay, I just want to make sure we all understand that with the specific, that we understand that what we're enabling is essentially two ADUs to be constructed on a property without regard to the dimensional standards related to additional lot area and family requirement. That's number C in special requirements for local accessory dwellings. So right now, the table, basically depending on what zone you're in, let's say for RN, which is pretty widespread, is 6,000 square feet. So you need 6,000 square feet more than the allowable lot area for a single family, and essentially for 2 units you would need 12,000. But that doesn't apply here. So it's conceivable that quite a small lot could somehow manage to shoehorn 2 ADUs, and it could be done, and it could be done nicely. Just because something is tight and compact doesn't mean it's not appropriate or it's not going to work. But I want to be sure that we understand that the way this bylaw currently is written, we're allowing by administrative approval review potentially 2 ADUs on a lot that would be ordinarily would not permit such an amount of an additional amount of dwelling units. Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And I want to continue from that to just pose not exactly a hypothetical, but a scenario. If I were, in fact, we have a lot, we have a house in the RG that we rent. And I'm thinking that if I wanted to take advantage of this, I would say to myself, there's nothing that says these ADUs have to be separate buildings. There could be a duplex. And then I might decide to want to build them together. And then I get into a conversation with the building inspector or the building commissioner saying, well, I'm making 2 applications here for this duplex, which is odd because the first one is going to be a local ADU, and the other half of the duplex is the protected ADU. So I don't have to go to the zoning board for this, right? I'm just going to build my duplex, and I'm going to build them more or less at the same time, except there's going to be a nanosecond between when I complete the first, which is the local, and the second, which is the protected. And I've got a nice little cluster, which could look better than having two separate buildings. But I can see that because I think this way, and that's what I would do. And that's the second question I have for us. Are we comfortable with the prospect of these sorts of things happening? I think I'm more or less am. I would be more comfortable if we adopted Doug's suggestion and had the basically discretion the special permit applying to both cases of the local. I think that would make it less peculiar, because in both instances, where you had two duplexes, you would have some kind of deliberation with a body that would have the power to say no for good reason or for defensible reason. So that's not really it's a kind of question of all of us. Are we comfortable with what we're actually allowing here?
Bruce, what would you think if the local ADU was subject to dimensional standards? Would that improve your scenario in any way?
I think it.
I don't know. I just throw that out. I mean, that's
Yeah.
middle
I mean, as
ground.
I said, I don't have intrinsically a problem with that kind of density, because but of course I would if I thought someone was going in with no design skills or thoughtfulness. But then that doesn't change if we necessarily if we had the 6,000. It just means that there's a bigger space to make a mess in. I think I'm okay, but I want to make sure I'm okay by
Yeah. Well,
posing
I mean,
this hypothetical so that we can say, no, Bruce, you're wrong. It's okay because, or gee, I'm not sure. I
well,
think I'm okay.
okay. Nate, you had your hand up for a minute. Did you have a response to Bruce, or?
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to clarify that, right, so the additional lot area per family, per unit doesn't apply, but the other dimensional standards do. So, lot coverage and setbacks would for local ADU. They're a little different for protected. I think Bruce's example is interesting. Staff's talked about, we're trying to talk about different scenarios, right? So, there's been an application now, I think there's two, where someone's building a single family house, and as part of it, they're building an ADU as part of, within the structure. And so it really is just one building permit application. So, right, the same kind of questions come up about timing and sequencing, and it just gets a little, a little muddy to say, okay, well, yeah, I'll build really a duplex, but they're both ADUs on a property because I have the other principal dwelling, and I'll delay my application by a minute, or however, whatever would satisfy the bylaw. But yeah,
Well,
so it could be a real scenario.
Yeah, I have to say, I've come to this town even, but also other towns, with crafty little deals like this, because I think it's a good idea, and I can make it work by perhaps trying to slide through a crack in the regulation that wasn't perhaps intended, but I felt was probably going to result in a good solution. So and I think this is a crack that probably could result in a fairly good solution. It's just that I can see some people thinking that we were idiots because we didn't anticipate this, and therefore we're stupid and it's wrong and we ought to have our heads handed to us. So I thought I might at least mention it so it's on the record.
Okay. Food for thought. Jara?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you to Bruce for making us all look smarter by bringing that up and putting it on the record, because that is a pretty clever scenario you came up with. Um, I feel I'm curious. Well, Nate, I'm curious to hear from you a little bit more about like the redefinition of uses, like into like what defines a triplex. Although I wonder if that could perhaps happen like at a later date, like sequentially. Is that something that we could talk about later down the road after adopting this ADU policy? Um, I feel pretty strongly, I want to say that we maintain the local ADU and the protected use ADU. I think that there is a meaningful difference between that 900 square feet or 1,000 and 1,200 with the owner occupancy. I certainly, I understand concerns around like two ADUs running rampant around town. I do want to remind us, like, we can always change the bylaw if we find that someone seems to be taking advantage of this well-intentioned policy. I worry a little bit about requiring a special permit for all local ADUs in the fear that that might disincentivize the owner occupancy, might disincentivize those slightly larger, more comfortable ADUs. But I certainly see the merit, Doug, in your point of like, well, that helps us that gives us the discretion for every case where there'd be two ADUs potentially on a property. But I do worry that that extra barrier might disincentivize those kinds of homes. So I guess I just wanted to state that for the record. I feel pretty strongly that would keep two. I would rather that we don't add a special permitting process for every local ADU. And Nate, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on like sequencing of passing this versus having only a protected use ADU and then redefining triplexes down the road.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to mention the special permit for the first local ADU. Again, I'll just say that I think it's an inefficient use of board's time. And so if it's only the threat of being denied because it's discretionary, but they all get approved, which is what happens now with the same conditions, it's the whole reason why we want to go to administrative approval. Why waste someone's time, the ZBA's time, $3,000 in legal ad fees and applicant fees just to say yes with conditions, but knowing that maybe it could be denied, but it rarely is. And so, what we found is honestly, it's like, if we could require owner occupancy for the protected ADU, I would have been like, let's get this over with in one meeting and move on to something more important, right? Instead, we're stuck with, do we want to have owner occupancy requirement and have a little bigger dwelling unit? And so that's where I'm like, let's just, honestly, at this point, I say, let's just do a protected ADU, because it seems like we're getting sidetracked. And then I think the real idea is, right, so, two counselors, Manny Joe and Pat DeAngelis, brought a proposal a few years ago to restructure some use classifications in the bylaw. And and then also change how they're permitted, whether it's from like site plan review to just administrative approval or site plan review or special permit. But they did it, it was a pretty wide, pretty big zoning amendment. And I think there was a lot of unintended consequences. But the idea, staff has talked about this for a while, is like, let's allow 3 units on a property. And it could be to a few different zoning districts. And so right now we can get there through apartments, through townhouses, through converted dwellings, subdividable dwellings. And honestly, I think subdividable dwellings and converted dwellings, it's a silly use classification. I'd rather just say, okay, if we think we can have 3 units on a property in the RG, RN, and RO, or wherever we want it, we just say, let's allow 3 units. And it could be a form of a duplex, a townhouse, and we would be flexible in our use classification. We can have design standards, we can have standards and conditions, it could go through permitting, and we could allow 4 units, and then we could redefine apartments, because right now it's either nothing, 3 to 20 in a building. And so we say by special permit, we don't allow them in most zoning districts, or a special permit. We don't allow townhouses in many zoning districts, or it's by special permit. And so I'd rather say, okay, if we are really serious about infill, and infill that looks good, let's put some design guidelines on there. Let's come up with some use classifications for middle density and actually work on it, rather than trying to monkey with like, let's allow maybe 2 ADUs on a property and worry about owner occupancy and whether it's going to be a special permit or not, right? Because
So for tonight, you would say, let's just pass the protected use ADU, and then we can work on these other things in the future.
yeah, if we're getting really concerned about, can the owner occupancy requirement withstand a legal challenge? Well, let's just make it all a special permit. And to me, that just disincentivizes and honestly is not an efficient use of board's time. I would say let's just stick with a protected use ADU. And so Jay, I know we can change the bylaw, but this process takes months. Like, so even if we did it both and we're like, this is great, and then all of a sudden we get like a rush of applications, by the time we then change it back to something we might like, it could be a year. And so I would rather work incrementally and allow a protected ADU, maybe make it a little bigger, I'll throw that in there, and then say, okay, what are some other things we could do in the next 6 months to bring maybe another zoning amendment forward? And I'd like to think, okay, like every year we could have a zoning amendment or two related to housing, especially if the housing production plan gets approved. And so I'd rather work incrementally than say, oh, we think it's going to work, but we're not sure. I just feel like we're spending a lot of time on the ADU piece when we could be saying, well, let's just actually look at apartments and townhouses or cottage style development or something that would have more benefit for our time.
All right. Angus.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I guess I view the ADU conversation as slightly different than the conversation around triplexes and redefining medium density and that kind of thing. I understand that we're really fixated on the idea of people coming to create 2 of these. I understand that is a case that will likely happen, at least a little bit. But I also don't want us to lose sight of that the point of this is going back, to the very top, is trying to create different kinds of options for housing people, right? And this is a different of just, I think the ADU as an approach is just a different approach than the medium density options. And especially if we're thinking of ADUs as things like for elderly parents, or for children who need to live nearby their parents. I feel like the 2 options is actually pretty useful. And I'll just add, we have sunk a lot of time already into this, and we're not getting that back. And I think the staff has done a really nice job of delineating these 2 options. I like the owner occupancy requirement. It feels to me like we could still move forward with this and still have those conversations around triplexes or other things, as a different approach to a different set of considerations than what the ADUs are trying to do.
All right. Thanks, Angus. Jara.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, Nate, like I really appreciate your desire for like incremental approach, because I think that is really important and the right way to go about most things. I still feel though like that this is the concerns around this happening and being taken advantage of. They don't the trade-off of hedging our bets with that, or like concern that this will get challenged in court, doesn't feel like a weighty enough trade-off to take away, as Angus put it, like different options for people to have housing on their property, whether that be larger for parents or whatever the case may be. So I also, I agree that like with what Angus said, like I think staff has done a great job with this. I don't think we need to like throw the baby out with the bathwater at all. In fact, I think, the ordinance looks good to me. Since it has both types in it, and sounds like the CRC is open to that as well. So well, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Just when I thought you were going to make a motion. Fred.
Yeah, I agree with the last 2 speakers. I don't want to lose the owner occupancy where I can get it. And this is the way to move forward with that. So perhaps I will make the motion to move forward with the version as presented by staff and the distribution that occurred this afternoon.
All right, Fred. I am going to take public comment before we get too much farther, but does anybody want to second this?
I was gonna,
Yes, I'll second it if that's not what the other two
Okay,
have done.
Bruce, well, go ahead. Thank you, Bruce, and go ahead, Johanna.
sorry, I was gonna second the motion with the friendly amendment to also close the public hearing.
Okay, Jara, is that, let's see, Fred, is that friendly amendment accepted?
Yes,
All right, and Bruce, your second holds?
Let Johanna second. She had her hand up, but I thought it was to make a comment rather than to second. So she seconds. I just withdraw my comment.
Okay, and Johanna, before we leave you, did you have another comment?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Nate, why don't you go, and then we'll have Angus, and then I'll go to public comment if there is any.
Oh, sure. I was going to just share my screen just so we see the document, you know, there at the, just so you understand the gross floor area change that was shown. And, you know, and that right now it is, you know, local ADU first, administrative approval, protected ADU first, then it's site special permit. So that's what's there. Yeah, and you know, and I was gonna say, I don't, you know, if for instance we decided to go with a protected ADU, I know we spent time talking about both. That's okay, right? With staff, to me, it's an exercise to learn, you know, what we think is a good approach, and it's really the planning board's recommendations to council. And so, you know, if something doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I mean, you know, that's, to me, it's time well spent. It gets ideas going, and so it's, I don't, you know, I don't consider it, you know, a loss at all. So just quickly for local ADU, instead of saying 1,200 square feet of habitable space, this would say gross floor area. Gross floor area is defined now as the sum of all areas of all stories of the building of compliant ceiling height pursuant to the building code, including basements, lofts, and intermediate floor tiers, measured from the interior faces of exterior walls or from the center line of walls separating buildings or dwelling units, but excluding crawl spaces, garages, garage parking areas, attics, enclosed porches, and similar spaces. Where there are multiple principal dwellings on the lot, the gross floor area of the largest principal dwelling shall be used for determining the maximum size of a protected use ADU. So essentially, you know, you can probably always get to the maximum size of a protected ADU. And so now gross floor area would be used, and that's from the state regulation. So used to calculate both. What I had inserted at the bottom, which wasn't really, you know, I think we would want to refine is, you know, it's two versions or two ideas. The gross floor area for a local ADU does not include the area of unfinished basement space used for storage or utilities. Or we could write it, I mean, it's just, you know, what we think is clear, an unfinished basement in a local ADU should not be included in gross floor area. So, you know, I think one of these could be deleted, or they both could be modified in some way. They say the same thing. So I just want to make sure if we have the motion that, you know, we'd also change this language to be a final.
We'd pick one, or
Yep. Yeah.
or edit it into one final.
Right.
And you have no preference between the two?
No, no, as long as we think, like I said, again, as long as we think the language is clear, and, you know, a year from now, someone is reading it and we're like, okay, what does it mean? Then I don't really.
And up above, the first thing you highlighted was where you would change habitable space to gross.
Yes, yep.
So that would be a second change that needs to be
made
to be, you know, if
Right.
we're going to vote what we've got tonight, we need to change that.
Right, so it'd be this requirement found under the local ADU requirements, and then write the habitable space to gross floor area.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go ahead and make those changes to this version, or do a save as to
Yeah, no,
today's date?
I'll go forward and do it right now. And this version also incorporates a few changes from the CRC. They were minor. I think I'll just point them out. We had said 7.1 of the zoning bylaw, and we just say section 7 just because of section numbers change. And so, you know, their point was typically we try not to get so specific with our reference, and so our citation. So we say now with the residential rental property bylaw of the general bylaws, as opposed to, it had said something like section 3.50 of the town's general bylaws. And the concern is the general bylaws are often updated more frequently than zoning, and so sometimes that 3.5 may change in a year, and so they just had to name the bylaw.
Mhm.
And other than that, oh, found in article, so the more permissive dimensional regulations found in Article 6 of the zoning bylaw. We had said the wording changed slightly, but those are the only changes from this last time you saw it. So those three were recommended by the CRC. And then we just have these two statements to.
I would prefer the first one, I think. Just unfinished basement use. I mean, it's really almost immaterial. I see a couple of hands. Let's see what people think. Angus?
Yeah, I just had one other question for Nate, which is at the very top in the definition under local ADU, or I'm sorry, right before that, it's actually the applicability section,
I see.
BA. Yeah, right there. I just find it a little bit confusing that it says when a lot has only a local ADU, it shall require administrative approval. Should that read when a lot has no ADU, a local ADU shall require administrative approval?
Yeah, I stumbled over that too.
It's minor.
It makes it
Yeah.
look like when there's already a local ADU on the lot,
Yeah.
Right.
and you want to put a second one on.
So you had said when a lot has.
No ADU.
Yeah.
And then you can just say the local ADU
Yeah.
shall require. And then the B, or specifies if a protected use is already there.
Mhm.
And I can make a motion, but I'll wait for Bruce maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what, my hand.
Okay, good. Thanks, Angus. Bruce?
You're muted, Bruce.
Sorry, in definitions, B, principal dwelling, it just says there is whether on the lot in which it's situated on conforms to zoning. You've used zoning bylaw previously, and I'm wondering whether more specific, more appropriately, it might say conforms to the zoning bylaw. Is that necessary, or is the phrase zoning a euphemism that's acceptable in the language of the bylaw?
I think that's fine.
Okay, just wanted to eyeball it. That's it.
All right. Why don't I ask for public comment, Angus, before we get to the next? Okay, members of the public, now is the time to make a comment if you want to comment on this proposed ADU. This is a public hearing. All right, I am not seeing any hands. I guess we'll go back to the board conversation. So let's see, I'm trying to remember. We have a motion on the table with a second by Johanna. It was proposing it basically the way it shows up before us. It's been edited a little bit since. Jesse, I do see your hand. Why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I just feel compelled to make a comment. I'm fully in support of where we're going with this. I recognize so much time's been spent on this, none more so than staff probably. And early on, as I'm sure many of you remember, we had several conversations about the intent of the state law, and think I was the main pusher of this idea that I think Amherst is different, and I truly do not believe this new change will result in what the state's trying to achieve in our town. And so I'm a little disappointed in, I don't know, myself and us as a town for not pushing harder on this front to try and get an exception, get something different, because I really think this will not increase housing opportunities for long-term residents in our town. So just need to say that. Otherwise, I totally support moving on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Okay, Angus?
I was gonna move that we accept the changes to section 5.0111 BA, section 5.0112 D, and 5.0115 D, which are the three changes Nate just walked us through.
I would just ask,
All right.
gross floor area, which statement do we like? The first or the second, or do we want to come up with another one?
Can I amend my,
Sure.
I think we should just edit this, and then your motion will stand.
Yes.
yeah, that sounds good. I would vote the first one with Doug.
All right,
Doug,
well,
shouldn't we ask Fred to accept the motion's already on the floor and seconded?
yeah. Fred, are you all right with a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. How about Fred, while I've got you, do you have a preference for which of those two alternatives on this last paragraph?
I like the first paragraph,
All right,
the first
Well,
iteration, I
the
should
first
say.
the first alternative, okay. Does anybody object to the first alternative? We've had 3 members express their preference for it, and short of a vote of all of us, does anybody want to raise their hand to advocate for the second? All right, so Nate, why don't you erase the second one, and we will, let's see, Angus, your amendment stands. Fred has approved it or accepted it, and let's see, does any parliamentarian think we shouldn't just go ahead and vote if no one has any more comments?
Johanna should accept the friendly amendments as the second.
All right, Johanna, thank you, Bruce.
I accept the friendly amendments to the motion.
Thank you, Johanna. Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote on the ADU. This is a recommendation to council. This is not actually, we're not actually enacting the bylaw, but we're recommending the version that Nate has drafted and we've edited during this meeting to council. And so Nate, I assume you'll put together a recommendation letter for this ADU similar to the one I think you sent me this afternoon for the earlier one.
Right, yes. Yeah, and I just want to clarify, so we still have the permitting where, the administrative approval and then the special permit. So, Doug has suggested special permit for both instances, and that hasn't changed. That wasn't incorporated. So
That's fine.
everyone's okay with that.
Yep, I
Understood.
just wanted to raise the possibility. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. We'll start with you, Jara,
Aye.
and Johanna,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Angus,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. It's unanimous. And Johanna, you had amended, I think, to close the hearing. So I consider this hearing now closed. Time is 7:34. Okay, we'll go to the next item on the agenda. Planning Board elections and reorganization. By the way, the time, did I say that? It was 7:35 now. All right, so each year we vote new officers, and it's usually around this time after the summer break when everybody's kind of back. So we need to have a president or a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. To start with, why don't we start with the chair? Are there any nominations or volunteers to be chair? Bruce?
Doug, I want to ask you, are you prepared to continue? Because I nominate you to be the continuing chair. And
as I guess as before, I'm willing to keep doing this. I'd be happy to have somebody else if they wanted to do it. But if you all want me to continue to be the one that talks most,
actually talks least.
I'll be happy to do that.
And I'm wondering whether you might not put together a slate on the same basis. So I think Johanna is the vice chair.
Johanna is our current vice chair.
Yeah, and I can't remember who the clerk is. It's possibly me, but I don't.
is.
Yeah, Bruce, you're the one keeping all the minutes, right?
Yeah, yes, I'm doing a hell of a job. Well, I suppose I could nominate myself, but I'm thinking that we can do it in one shot as a slate of three. A move that the current board chair, vice chair, and clerk positions be continued for a further year. I guess that's a motion. Am I allowed to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we need a second.
Jesse, your hand is up.
Yep. I second the Marshall Newman Coldham ticket.
Okay.
Well, we'll have to get our election signs put together. Okay, this doesn't need to be a sort of a railroad operation here. Is there any, particularly the two new members, are you guys okay with the current administration, so to speak? All right, well, all right, I guess I'll say thank you for your vote of confidence. All right, so we should probably have a vote. So for officers continuing as in their current positions, Bruce, we'll start with you.
Aye.
And Fred?
Aye.
Angus?
Aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
Johanna?
Aye.
And Jara?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. All right, so that's unanimous. We will continue and we won't have to get new business cards. Okay, so that was fast and easy. Let's see, moving on to the general housing discussion. I will say it's now 7:38 on my computer.
Don't we have
We'll go?
board
Yeah.
missions that we want to talk about as well?
Oh, you're right. You can revisit the vote if you want. Yes, board liaisons. Okay. So we need a CPA. Angus, you're already our CPA representative. We did that last meeting, Johanna. So we need a DRB representative and a PVPC commission representative. Do we have any volunteers? Well, first I want to ask Bruce, you are now the PVPC liaison. Do you want to continue in that regard?
Well, I will accept that appointment. It's not as interesting an activity as I thought it would be for reasons that I previously expressed, but it is an obligation that the board has to find somebody, and I'll continue to take that on unless someone is sufficiently curious, which would be only that much curious, to challenge me for the position, in which case I would yield immediately.
All right, so do we have anybody else who would like to get familiar with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission? I am not seeing anybody move their hands at all. Everybody's frozen. Bruce, I think you, in that case, I will nominate Bruce Coldham to continue as our PVPC representative. Yeah, Jesse?
I will second that motion.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and vote unless anybody wants to speak to the motion? All right. Starting with you, Bruce.
I'm an I.
Fred,
Aye.
Angus,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Johanna,
Aye.
and Jara.
Aye.
And I'm an I as well. That's unanimous. Congratulations, Bruce.
And Nate, you could tell the town manager that I've spared him a bunch of letter writing and various other activities to try and get me onto this thing, or someone else onto this
Someone
thing.
else, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're ahead already.
All right. And then Jesse, you still have your hand up? Okay. Does anybody want to participate on the design review board? Jesse,
Can you remind us when that meets?
I think it only meets as necessary. When there's a new sign downtown or something that they need to review. Nate, am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think, right, I think they've been trying to meet, I think it's like the third Monday of the month. And it's been in the afternoon. And so, I will say, so Karen, who had been on the board, was the planning board rep, and her term runs through June 30th of 2026. And so, although she's no longer on the planning board, staff's understanding that she's still on the design review board because she had been and was appointed as the planning board rep for a certain term. So not to say we have to forego electing someone tonight, but if we did, then it would just replace her. Yeah, I mean,
So do you think that when we voted, we've actually voted for a term like that, a multi-year term? I mean, if I went to the minutes,
I had asked staff, and that's how I said, well, I had asked if Karen could continue serving, and it was told, well, her term expires in 2026, so I think so.
that seems contrary to my memory of the votes we've had for that position. I mean, not
Yeah.
that I mind having her on the DRB. I just, we have this kind of vote every year. And
Right.
until now, I guess I'd never heard that it was a multi-year appointment. Jesse?
Because logistically, if that's true, shouldn't she be coming to update the planning board on the design review board?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a little illogical.
would we have to vote to remove her if we wanted to vote someone else on?
We could have that in the motion, but I think it would just, I think we could manage that. So the design review board, yeah, they had posted a schedule online. I will say it looks like they're meeting September 15th, October 20th, November 17th, and December 15th. So they have really only kind of, estimated one meeting a month.
And you said it's in the afternoon.
It is.
And what time is it?
I think it's been meeting at well, it's moved around. I think I'm gonna look at their recent agenda. It may started at oh, actually, so they're meeting at 5 p.m. now. Yep, 5 p.m. It's over Zoom.
Okay. Bruce?
I'm reflecting over the 3 years, and we've had, I've always regarded whether it was Tom, I think, Tom Long, followed by Curran, as what I understood to be the planning board representative on the DRB. But I hadn't thought that there was a terribly important continuum. The DRB makes its recommendations. They're written down. They're in the pack. We read them. And it doesn't seem to me that it's very important that we have a representative on, and if the position's already filled and the DRB is functioning with a full complement, I would be inclined to leave it that way until 2026 and we revisit it.
Mhm. Nate, do you see any problem with that?
No, I mean, I can, I'm not, I was gonna see if Karen has been in attendance. I don't know, if that's been communicated clearly with her. I agree with you, Doug. It seems a little strange that if they're a board representative and they're no longer on the board that they're representing, do they continue on as, but
Well, I mean, like Bruce said, when Tom Long left the board and Karen came on, there wasn't any
right.
lag there. So, well, I guess nobody is especially eager to get on the DRB at the moment. I guess I had thought that it's possible that I would be willing to do it. But if we don't need to do it right now, I guess I'm not that eager. So Nate, why don't you talk to staff and maybe see what's been communicated with Karen and get back to us in the next meeting. And
Sure.
if we need to, if we need to vote somebody on, I guess I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, I just checked, she's been attending meetings, so we can.
Yes, okay. All right. Well, then I guess we can ask her to submit a report. Okay, time is 7:47. Do you want to start the general housing discussion about the overlay or just take a 5-minute break and then come back to that?
I think on this agenda topic, we also had subcommittees. And I just
Oh.
want
I keep trying to move on, don't I?
to, you're ready.
Yeah, okay, board subcommittees, housing subcommittee, zoning subcommittee, and any others. Yeah, we have voted the housing subcommittee at some point in the recent past. Jesse and Bruce, and I forget who else was on that.
Right, it was initially myself, Bruce, Fred, and Karen.
Uh-huh, okay.
Since Karen dropped, there's just the three of us.
Yep.
I know there may be other interest, which is of course fantastic. I would say one thing, that it seems to be easier to meet quorum with 3 than it was with 4, just because of the requirements. But of course, everyone is absolutely welcome to join, whether you're official or not.
And when do you
We've been meeting Wednesdays, either midday or in the evening, and working around planning board schedule, and not every other week, but it seems like 2 out of the 3 open Wednesdays. So when planning board's not meeting, we'll meet 2 of those 3 sort of times. If
Okay.
that was a logical way to say that.
All right. Does anybody else want to join the housing subcommittee? All right. So we could use a motion.
Can I say one other
yes,
comment? Sorry. Angus, I apologize. I never replied. I think you made a comment at some point about a zoning subcommittee. I was wondering if we needed both. I mean, I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I was certainly pondering, well, what if we tried to merge those 2 ideas and sort of alternate topics or something like that? Try that for a while.
Well, we
Guessing-
could just put the 3 of you on the zoning, and maybe with Angus, put you all on the zoning subcommittee, which is a broader charge than housing, and you guys could decide what you want to talk about and refer back to the rest of us. Angus?
Sorry. I think that's a great idea. I would vote keeping like saying housing and zoning subcommittee, just to I think so much of the work is going to be around housing. So I think that's a key thing to signal to people. And I would, I guess, want to nominate myself to be on said subcommittee.
All right, Nate.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that the zoning subcommittee previously, I mean, it could be anything, right? So, for instance, we may want to consider changing the percentage of mixed-use buildings in outlying village centers. And, the planning board is, one, legally can sponsor a zoning amendment. And so the idea would be maybe that's to be looked at, or, we need, what if we need new classifications for industrial uses? The building commissioner has ideas, staff has a list, going back a while, and many of them don't deal with housing. And so I don't necessarily want to dilute, if the housing subcommittee is really focused on housing, that, it can bring forth, zoning amendments related to housing or other initiatives or ideas. If you add zoning, I just would want to make sure you understand that it could be that, because once we start discussing a zoning topic, I wouldn't want to then alternate meetings and be like, well, this meeting we're talking about housing, and the next meeting we're talking about zoning, and then, the idea would be to try to get things done kind of quickly in a subcommittee or move them along. And so I think sometimes it could be really two different topics.
So you'd advocate to have two different groups, or what
if
would
we
you?
think the
what would
zoning
your
subcommittee was going to be really active, I would. Because like I said, you could be looking at things like the dimensional standards. Do we expand the BL zoning district because, for whatever reason, right? Or we want to, so there's so many different ideas for zoning that, right, might relate to housing, but they're really a separate zoning issue. And I just, if we think that maybe it's going to parallel housing, fine, but, I don't know. Maybe it's the planning board too gives direction to this subcommittee, right? I think the idea would be for the housing subcommittee, if it remains the housing subcommittee and the town council approves the housing production plan, I've said it would be great to meet with the housing trust and kind of come up with some ideas for the next year. And then the planning board is giving some guidance to its subcommittees. I just, I think there's so much to do with zoning. I would just hate to get sidetracked.
Right. Well, my concern is that there's only so many of us and so many Wednesday nights, and if we're all focused on housing, there may not be anybody that really wants to take the additional time to work on zoning outside of a meeting, outside of one of our regular planning board meetings, which we could do. I mean, you could bring proposals to the full board and we could talk about them.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is hard. I agree. I mean, if we have, say 2 hearings in an evening or 3, it's hard to then keep adding, have 5 agenda items knowing each one needs, an hour.
right.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is a relatively quiet time in terms of proposals for specific developments. So, I mean, this is a time we could try to make some headway on those other things.
I will say, yeah, we're staff's trying to work on 2, 2 more zoning amendments.
Okay. So I see 4 hands, starting with you, Bruce.
I like the idea of Angus on the committee of 3 at the moment, making it 4, and assuming we can make the quorum thing work better than we have been able to. My thought would be that, Jesse, you would lead the quartet so far as you've been doing with housing issues. When Angus joins, and basically, Angus, you would explore and pursue and flesh out some thinking, sort of strategic thinking about zoning, what your interests are, and you would use this committee to help you develop those. And so in a given meeting that maybe run an hour or an hour and 15 minutes, we might have 20 minutes or 15 or even 10, and sometimes a lot more, but that there would be a minority amount of time given to your discussions on topics that you're developing, because you're taking a lot of you're getting a general sense of things. I remember how I did this initially with housing, and I was by myself, and it would have been good if I had a little bit more help, but it didn't matter really, but it would have been better. And I see that this, Nate, is kind of disagreeing with you. I'm seeing that this quartet could be primarily the housing, but it could incubate the zoning in the way I've described, and then they could grow together, or there could be a separation if the the agenda and the specific workloads and so forth developed that made that appropriate. But I like the idea of supporting Angus initially incubating his thinking using this group.
All right. I guess I'll go to Fred next.
Yeah, as I think maybe the longest serving member of the current planning board, having been on the board for 6.5 years previous. And 4 years of that time, I chaired what was then the zoning subcommittee. And just Amherst being what it is, most of the zoning controversies in some way or another have to do with housing. And so I think it's a kind of a distinction without a difference, and I don't care what we call it. One thing that I would like to suggest, and I think, again, most of this is going to have a housing dimension, but there are lots of things. The Amherst zoning bylaw is a very complicated document, and a lot of things are in it that really need to get straightened out. And I'll give you just one very compelling example, and that is the definition of owner occupancy. And that is obviously a crucial definition. And I am the person who originally created that definition. And the reason it was created was I created the concept of subdividable dwelling. And one of the things that was politically necessary at that point was to condition that on owner occupancy. And there was no owner occupancy definition in the bylaw. And so Bill O'Neill and I created that definition. Well, there is a major problem with that definition. And that is, it does not address situations where the owner is a trust. And we're seeing this in increasing frequency. And everybody kind of knows what owner occupancy is, but it doesn't line up with the literal text of the definition in the bylaw. That needs to get fixed. It's a comparatively no-brainer, but it needs to get fixed. And I think there's a lot of the stuff in the bylaw that we could look at.
All right, thanks, Fred. Jesse?
Thanks. I'm open to any of these possibilities, but I think I would defer really to respect staff's thoughts, because they're the ones who have to wrangle all this information and help us be efficient and move things forward. And so I'm also thinking about how I've been now on planning board, I guess, for 2 years, and several times Nate has brought up, or it's come up, the idea of that the zoning needs attention, and we've never gotten to it. Well, not never, but like it's there's other things always happening. And so I guess what I'm saying is maybe I'm leaning towards the idea of different subcommittees, even if the numbers are smaller on those 2 committees. Everyone's still free to attend the other committees, right? And maybe that's a way to help things move quicker than, oh, we only have an hour and a half for the combined meeting and we're trying to do too many things, so nothing really moves forward toward coming to the full board. Like maybe it's a subcommittee of 2, and that's enough to work out some of the kinks to get something ready to come to the full board. So just food for thought, I guess.
Okay. I thought there was one more hand up, but maybe not.
I had my hand up, but I took it down.
All right. Thank you, Jara. All right, so Bruce, go ahead.
I'll second Angus's self-nomination to the Housing Subcommittee. I think I'd like to decide on that one way or the other.
Okay, so we're up to 4 members of the Housing Subcommittee.
If we're being, sorry,
Yep.
sorry, if we're being official, I guess I'll nominate the three of us again to be on the subcommittee, because that hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so,
And I'll nominate myself to continue as chair. I'm happy to do that unless someone else wants to.
okay,
And I
Jara,
think Bruce was vice chair.
Bruce was vice chair, Jara.
I would just like to second that motion to
Okay,
nominate all
so,
three.
so I think cumulatively, we have a motion for Jesse, Bruce, Fred, and Angus to be on the Housing Subcommittee with Jesse as chair, and it has been seconded. All right, any further discussion? Nate,
Is it the housing subcommittee, or are we gonna actually say housing and zoning subcommittee? I think if they're gonna talk about general zoning topics, I do like the insertion of that just as a
all right,
indicator.
all right. Are you guys with
oh.
that friendly amendment?
Yeah, I think that's fine with me. I support that.
Okay. Any objections? Okay, Housing and Zoning Subcommittee. Starting with you, Bruce,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Angus,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Johanna,
Aye.
Jara.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you guys. All right, so I'm not going to go to the next thing next. I'm going to take a break.
Okay.
It's now 2 minutes after 8 o'clock. Come back in 5 minutes or thereabouts. Turn your camera back on when you come back. Thank you. All right, as you come back, please turn on your phone or turn on your camera. All right, we are coming back. Still need a couple of members. All right, everyone's back. Time on my clock is 10 after 8. We'll go on to the fifth item on the agenda, which is the general housing discussion and continuing discussion regarding a potential overlay for the existing apartment complexes in North Amherst. Nate, you want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, thanks everyone. The North Amherst overlay, we've discussed it a bit. The Housing Subcommittee talked about it at its recent meeting, and there are some comments made from the public. And I think, there's a lot of concerns about what the impact of this overlay would have on North Amherst. And there's a number of questions about, traffic, wetlands, affordability, just general congestion. What's the benefit of to North Amherst, and why focus on North Amherst? And I think the counselors in that district are looking at how incorporating this into some meeting that Bruce had mentioned as well, a precinct meeting or some meeting in the fall. And so I
Yep.
sent around the document, kind of the framework for the zoning, and I think it's just really important. I mean, I feel like we have a document modeled after the University Drive overlay that has a lot of information. And I just wanted to step back a little bit and kind of just address some of the bigger topics and kind of framework for it. And I think it'll be important I think it will be important to have a public meeting. I think there'll be a lot of pushback. And so I just want to make sure we're clear with what we think the purpose and intention is. And then, I think what I've said all along too is it's really difficult I think it can be difficult to allow flexibility in zoning and then assure people that, oh, it'll look good or it'll be what we want. And so, to have an overlay, and I think we have some setbacks, and I think some of the dimensional pieces are actually pretty nice. It then comes down to kind of that site layout piece. And so, last time we spoke, and I think maybe it was at the Housing Subcommittee, I forget if it was here, we can require a pre-application meeting with staff. And we could require a few meetings. And so it would be, we could spell it out. I found a few examples from other communities. Especially as an overlay, we could do that. So we could have more than just a concept plan. We could have a concept plan. We could have a site plan, a number of things. And I think it would be helpful within that framework. I had some ideas for do we have building and design standards or open space requirements, site plan requirements? And it could just be kind of some simple, I mean, I say simple, but it always gets, tricky. But, having some statements or conditions under each of those to help guide an applicant and staff. And so, for instance, Bruce came out with kind of a concept idea to figure out the density, and it looked okay, right? But a developer might come in and be like, well, I'm just going to put all my buildings together, and they're going to be just 10 feet apart, and it's going to look kind of massive, and it's not going to have a nice site layout, or, whatever. And so it's really hard to envision all the variables if you're talking about these sites, and what could be the potential development layout. And so, yeah, I think it's something to consider. And I do think, that at the Housing Subcommittee, we said, well, there's other parts of town we're also considering. I think that's important to kind of mention that, North Amherst, we looked at University Drive, it's North Amherst. We've talked about East Amherst, which we'd like to revisit, and maybe even other areas around campus, whether it's Olympia Drive or, north of Fearing Street or along Mass Ave again. And so I think, it's really hard to say, oh, well, we're going to work on all four of these at the same time. And I think it, as we've just spent a lot of time with the ADUs, it's there's a lot of work goes into that. And so I think each district deserves its own attention. I think we can take, things we've learned as we do these and apply them. But, for instance, if we're doing an overlay in East Amherst, I think it would be completely different than what we've done on University Drive and what we're planning for North Amherst. And so it's hard to replicate it exactly. I think we, understand the process, but so I think focusing one area at a time makes sense. It's just, I think it leaves people uneasy thinking, well, geez, why are we, they feel like they're kind of targeted in terms of what's happening in their area of town.
Well, and I mean, although we're not doing this to beat up on North Amherst. We're trying to improve the general welfare in the whole town. And so by meeting with North Amherst, I hope we are there to hear what they have to say and take it into consideration. But, on the other hand, we need to think larger about the entire town rather than solely their interests. Is that, I'm not sure that sounds great, but I think it's the reality. Johanna?
Awesome. Thanks for the overview, Nate.
I'm curious to just see what those public comments are and the number of people making them. And I don't know if those are reflected in the minutes of the housing subcommittee, but there's part of me that maybe we could get access to those, because I do read those and pay attention to them. And I feel like by not participating in the subcommittee, we have public hearings on these proposals, but if those comments are being made in a different forum, then they don't necessarily reach us. So I don't know if those are available, but I would be interested to see them. And then, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, Jesse?
Thanks. Just to, remind us all of, conversation we've had multiple times in the subcommittee. I know it's been in this bigger committee at least once, that, the reason for this particular area and some others is that there's very few sites close to university density specifically designed for students makes sense. So that's really the main motivation for the North Amherst idea. And I think we need to stress that repeatedly to lots of years. And as just to reiterate what Nate said, it's not specifically North Amherst, there's other areas that'll come up next. Hannah, yes, there are minutes. I think the comments are reflected. I can try and put them together and circulate those as well. I think it was really just 2 people thus far, at least at the subcommittee, who've commented. And it's been really the concerns that Nate just laid out. Traffic, emergency, making sure it looks nice. Yeah.
Okay, Jara?
Nate, can you remind me, like, is the town planning to do a master time in the near future? And I also am curious, and a little embarrassed, I can't remember off the top of my head. Did the housing production plan give any geographically specific recommendations on where to concentrate future housing production?
Nate?
Yeah, I think, the master plan, the idea would be to have a new one in place by 2030. There's an allowance in the charter to maybe go to 2032. So it is a process that would be starting in the next few years, but, we have 5 years, 6 years under the current master plan. I think the master plan, whether or not it identifies this area, I feel like, for some of the reasons mentioned, the public infrastructure, utilities, bus lines, it's already developed. To me, it would be, generically speaking, it's an, whether or not it's called out. The housing and production plan, I don't think it identified this area specifically. I think it, again, it kind of, there are a few sites it looked at, but not this one. And I think some of it would be, it mentions kind of like I just, said, kind of parameters around housing, right? So it did talk about where is there water service and sewer service and what makes the most sense. And so, I think this area does. I think some of it is, it's already some of the densest housing in town outside of the campus proper. And so then the question is, well, how much more density can it handle? And so, yeah, Johanna, I think, right, there's only been a few people. I think the idea was we're trying to get, to a point where we're comfortable then kind of daylighting this and actually inviting the public. And so, going out to North Amherst or having a separate meeting, if we think we're ready, maybe if not this meeting, next meeting, we could set up a web page on the planning department and planning board and, start collecting public comment. And then I think maybe we're almost there. I think we'd have to, I think I want to say, I feel like there's probably going to be a lot of negativity around it. And I think we just have to be ready for it. And then can we justify why we're doing it? I think, Doug, you made a good point. I think there's a lot of points to support it. And I think there's a lot of points and, for to be cautious. I do think that, some people might think that the university needs to house more students on campus. I think actually it's a benefit to have them off campus, and for a number of reasons. And so I think we could do this. At one point I had said last meeting or at the housing subcommittee, maybe it doesn't have to be as dense. And Bruce said, well, let's not shy away from the fact that we need a lot of units to essentially to help with the student housing. And so, yeah, so I don't think the housing production plan, gets to this level of detail JARA, sorry, my roundabout answer, they have a number of strategies and initiatives in it. And I think some of these could lend itself to this kind of overlay, but it doesn't say like, oh, look at, you know, a dense overlay in North Amherst or a dense overlay here. It might talk about, you know, that generically, and then really then it becomes a decision of the board or the town to say, how do we want to implement those strategies from the plan and get more detailed, which is kind of what we're doing now. And I think, to me, from the housing production plan, you know, for instance, they talk about cottage style development. So that's something we could run with, or, you know, financing mechanisms for home ownership, or, you know, looking at our residential zoning districts to talk about, are the dimensional standards appropriate? And so again, you know, there's all these, they don't tell us what the right density numbers are, right? What the right dimensional standard is. They just say, maybe look at your residential zones. And then it's a local conversation to determine, well, what zone do we want to look at, you know, for instance.
Great. Okay. So what I'm hearing, just to like put it succinctly, is that this overlay that we're proposing is in alignment with our current master plan and taking into consideration recommendations made from the housing production plan.
Right.
Is that
And
correct?
yes, and from, you know,
Great.
previously from the 2015 comprehensive housing market study, and there was a university town gown committee, and they had some similar ideas of concentrating development near the university. So, you know, it's in a number of reports going back, you know, 10 plus years that kind of support the idea of putting development in already developed areas.
Right. Right. Okay. So this is clearly a well-considered, much talked about, considered
Right.
proposal.
Yeah, and you know, this area was studied in 2013, as was all the other multi-unit properties in town. And so I think what happened was, you know, say there's 50 of them, the overlay was going to cover all 50 of them, and I think it was too scary for people, and so it was discussed at a bunch of meetings, and then it never really went anywhere and became an official zoning amendment. So it was just kind of too big. And so we decided, well, let's just focus on this North Amherst piece as maybe the first one, and then we can look at others, right? So I still think it's probably, you know, it makes people uneasy. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Fred, you're next.
Yeah, one thing that was somewhat new was the comments of Councilor Shane, who represents that part of town in the council, and she talked about North Amherst feeling like it's becoming the locus of attempts by the town to deal with the you know, housing issues generally, and she thought it was unfairly on the table as far as what we would expect to be contributed towards the whole. And as she was commenting, I was thinking to myself that in many ways she sounds like I can remember myself sounding in terms of the general residence zoning district, which I think is the members of the council have unfairly concentrated intended fixes for this. And so I was sitting there saying, you know, I feel her pain, as it were. And I look forward to participating in the North Amherst gatherings because I really do understand their concerns. And I also think that the approach here in this particular part of town is the appropriate one. And I can kind of get behind feeling that pain and also concluding that this is the right approach to take. And I think I may have some credibility because of my address. I may have some credibility here that others might not.
Okay, thank you, Fred. I can say I also live in the RG zoning district. Angus, you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to second a lot of the things that people have already said. And I'm in agreement with Fred. I think so much of it seems to me as a relative newcomer that so much of our concern in long-term planning is around how to house students, and that's driving a lot of anxiety in the town and has for a long time. And so I think the ADU conversation, right, is a great example of this. We're really concerned about how the need for student housing is going to distort policies that we intend for other purposes. And I would defer to members who have been on the board longer, but I imagine other conversations have played out similarly with concerns over student housing. And so I just want to second, Fred's point that I think it's really important to try to find places where we can figure out where students already live, especially where we can figure out how to house more students so that we can free up our conversations and our thinking and preserve the neighborhoods where long-term residents live, including residents in North Amherst. If we don't house the students, they are going to find places to live, and that's going to mean converting current residences that people in North Amherst live in. So anyway, I just want to say that as a big preamble. I'm excited to learn more as a newly voted member of the Housing and Zoning Subcommittee about these plans. I'll just register one concern that I do have, which is I guess I worry about the idea of pursuing a number of overlays as opposed to looking more wholesale at changes across town. And Nate, I appreciate your clarification of the challenges that happened earlier with proposing big changes. But I also appreciated your comment earlier about thinking about triplexes or smaller scale things that could apply town-wide that would share a little bit more of the burden, because I think it makes a lot of sense that these geographically targeted overlays are going to raise more concerns in specific geographic areas. So I just want to flag that as something, for the Housing and Zoning Subcommittee to think more about balancing overlays, which in some ways are lighter lifts, but might draw more geographically concentrated ire from people, and more town-wide changes, which I'm sure y'all are already thinking about. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about that with you all. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Angus. Bruce, you are up next.
I've been focusing on how we bring this to the local audience, because that seems to be the next task. And I've been thinking about how one would conduct a productive public meeting. And I've got a structure in my head. And I could tell you what it is now, but clearly we need to have an agenda, a structure, an approach. And briefly, I think it would take the form of, first would be a summary statement of the need. And I think it would reveal or discuss, elaborate the focus of need being on student rental housing. And we should be able to prove that or to substantiate that. That's the first piece. And then the second piece, I think, would be to summarize the strategic options and before us. And I've got three, but there might be others. But broadly speaking, it's we would rely on UMass to solve the problem. Number two would be we would rely on some minimum distancing and student home definition to solve the rental problem by managing its spread throughout the whole of the community and trying not to cause it to. I don't think it's a good idea, but that's a strategic option. And the third strategic option seems to be to identify places, ideally close to campus, which would be sufficiently large and capable of accepting a much higher density that would be commensurate with the scale of the problem. So those are the three options. I mean, there's a couple others. You could say, well, we should try and discuss all this with Hadley and see if Hadley would, and the mall people would allow a massive student housing development to happen at Hampshire Mall. Seriously, I mean, that's an option. But
There's the
we
do nothing.
we basically take the high level view of the strategic options before us. And then we say, in this case, we are looking at what options, the potential of option C, which is, and we think that the concept of an overlay, and then we describe that overlay concept that Nate has been doing, and we do it very succinctly and with bullets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, and with maps and diagrams. That's C, and then 3, 4. We basically open it up for discussion, comment, and reaction. And if I would offer to facilitate that part of it because I did this for a living for years, and I would try and tabulate pro and con. I would basically distill the commentary into pro and con, and I would try and distill the comment into a sentence that was acceptable to the commenter and put it on an easel publicly so it's legible. I can write legibly. Most people can't. And the standard is to be able to read what is written from 30 feet or maybe 20 feet if you've got bad eyes. And you put that up around the wall and you have a record of the conversation. And that's the structure that I would propose that we use to extract the maximum potential out of that meeting that would probably last 2 hours. I have to say the community room's probably okay. I wouldn't use slide projection. I would use maps on the wall, visuals that are there all the time and don't flash on and off. We don't rely on space-consuming things like screens and projectors because it's a small room. It's very possibly going to be packed. We should have planned for that possibility. So that's what I've been thinking about. How do we take advantage of this public meeting, which has been discussed? I think that some of the, I mean, I've already got a pretty good notion of what the pro and con is going to look like, so I would come prepared because I've heard a lot of these statements, and I think I could have the statements in my head. So when someone says it, I would have a pretty good idea what was being said. So I would then modify what was being. I would be ready for what most people were saying. But still, it would be recorded in a way that was satisfactory to the speaker. But I think I could do that pretty well. I think that my sense is that maybe Jesse or you, Doug, or that it seems to me that it might be better for planning board members to make this presentation rather than you, Nate. I don't know whether that's right. It just feels to me that this is a resident on resident thing. I think we should take the heat and not you, or take the responsibility, I should say. But so that's the way I'm thinking about how we could move this to the next step.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Jesse?
Very much agree with what Bruce just laid out. Some suggestions if we want to get closer. I've been thinking about that a lot as well. I want to add 2 more points for the committee coming out of the subcommittee conversations. One is what Nate mentioned about requiring the pre-meetings with developers to discuss potential plans. I think that's really important at this stage to make clear that that's part of what we're planning. It alleviates, I think, a lot of the fear response of, because we also, at least so far, we've designed it, or what we've talked about is allowing a significant amount of flexibility so that developers can tell us what they want to do, right? Rather than us trying to be really prescriptive, which feels more difficult. The other point, just discussion point, which I think is important as I've started to have conversations with others outside of this, and you all will as well, is that we're not requiring this massive density. We're just opening up the possibility, right? So I think everyone sees the idea and thinks, oh my God, for sure there's going to be 10,000 more students living here. But, you know, in reality, we don't know the response from developers. We don't know if it's going to be attractive at all, if anyone's going to take up the opportunity. I think that's important to make clear as well. For example, has there been any other movement in the University Drive overlay? I don't think so, right? Maybe things are brewing, but it's been how many months that it's been approved? I actually don't know. Maybe that's a real question for staff. Like, have there been other conversations yet? And that's a point we can use in this conversation too.
So yeah,
Okay.
no, there's been some inquiries about the overlay, but nothing serious. So
Okay. All right, I guess, Johanna, you're next.
I don't know if this is so much for the public meeting, although it could be, but part of the reason why the planning board arrived at the looking at different parts of town and proposing overlay district strategy was because larger town-wide comprehensive approaches were not succeeding. And so the thinking was, okay, let's, we have this problem. Comprehensive solutions aren't working. So let's see if we can identify discrete areas where we can move the needle, make some incremental change, and then just, almost like follow the path of least resistance. So when I started on the planning board, there was a lot of conversation about adding density downtown. And we were exploring a 40R district on the north end of town, and then, that got scuttled. And so then that was kind of like, all right, well, I think first we came to consensus around the idea that we actually do need to add housing in town. And Bruce led a really great conversation in the town room of town hall that kind of got all of us on the same page. And then we made a list of all the different areas in town where we thought there was kind of like ripe potential for it. And that was how we first landed on University Drive as like, let's see if we can make that happen. So now that that's done, I think the next spot was like, well, what's next? And we talked about East Amherst and then talked about this north end of town, and I think decided this had the next best route of kind of viable potential. It's possible that this idea of the, finding spots for overlay districts that we've depleted that strategy and it's run its course, and that's no longer the right approach. But I think there's still a lot of potential for it, both in the north end of town, in East Amherst Village Center, which is my village center. I think potentially even in the like Pomeroy Village Center, I think there could be appetite for something like this. And my hope is that when we get the downtown design standards, that'll help kind of prompt a next wave of revitalization and density in the downtown as well. So Bruce, I'm a little nervous about your meeting because I think it has the potential to just be like a hate fest. So if a meeting like that happens, I actually think it's really important to make sure everyone in the entire town knows about it so that they know that this is part of a larger strategy of looking at opportunities, and this is, just one, like kind of it's like the second bite at the apple of this overlay approach. So that North Amherst doesn't feel like, I don't know, like singled out, like they have to carry the quote burden. Not that I necessarily think having more neighbors and more amenities in your neighborhood is like by definition a burden. Okay, those are some thoughts and some context.
All right, thanks, Johanna. Jesse?
Thanks. So yes, Johan, I totally agree. And my main suggestion or twist on what Bruce presented was the whole thing starts with a whole town map with all of these areas bolded. University Drive, North Amherst, East Amherst, Gateway, Atkins, whatever, to make it very clear it's not the only one. But after our last subcommittee meeting, I was actually wondering if just put it out there for everyone else to think about. Another strategy is it'd be difficult, but to come up with essentially multiple overlays at the same time. So figure out North Amherst, figure out East Amherst, figure out Gateway if we want to do something there, and present them all at the same time. Like, and then it's not a single unified townwide overlay, but it's making the point to the town that it's a townwide thing we're doing rather than one at a time. And again, logistically, that feels enormous considering how much work we do and how long it takes to do one overlay. But in terms of getting buy-in from the whole town, maybe that's a better or a strategy that could work, or at least having rudimentary pieces of the other ones in mind to talk about. And like, oh yeah, we're also considering East Amherst, and it would be different because XYZ, and we imagine cottage style housing there or whatever. And yeah, maybe Gateway would be different because we're imagining it would have these different requirements and different pressures. And, so maybe it's worthwhile to try and be prepared with a little of that. I'm not sure. Maybe it's too much to try and take on.
Okay. All right, that's it for the hands at the moment. I will say I share a little bit of Johanna's fear of a hate fest, to use that phrase. I also feel, so in part, I feel like we should couch it as a listening session and not turn it into a back and forth. It's basically, in the sequence that you outlined, Bruce, that we present where we're at and then we get comments and that we stop there, that there's no point counterpoint that leads to more pointed and emotional conversation. It could also be held in North Amherst, but anybody in town is invited. So I think that would make it a little less all about North Amherst and might actually encourage one or two people to come from further afield who would have a slightly different perspective and maybe not quite so directly involved. So that's my 2 cents on what we've just talked about. Bruce?
Doug, I'm not too concerned about the hate fest, Doug and Johanna. I think it's because I've had an extremely high profile in North Amherst for 10 or 15 years, mostly through my chairmanship for 12 years of the North Amherst Community Farm and the various things that have been done there that basically astonished people. So I think I don't think people are likely to behave badly. I think I agree. We want to listen, but I think it's important to record what's said.
Yeah. Yes.
But I don't think it needs to be I think the pro and con is just when somebody says something that's expresses what they think is a problem, we should put it in one column, and somebody who thinks this is the reason why we're doing it, we should put it in another column. And I can imagine that there might be a lot more on one side than the other, but and we might decide, we being the proposers, might decide to list some of the things. For example, I wouldn't want people to forget that a significant density here could result in a significant village scale generation of affordable housing units. Stuff like that should be written down. Just a simple bullet point that says, so it basically helps get a picture. But I certainly think we're there to listen and we're there to record the reactions and we'll do it dispassionately. And I really think that because I'm the person in the planning board who's most familiar with that part of town, and that part of town I think is fairly familiar with me. I don't think there will be it won't degenerate, I don't think. I'm sure we can manage it entirely respectful and constructive encounter. I may be wrong, but I don't think I am.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Nate?
Sure, I was just going to share my screen and go through that framework document. I've added some things to it. It
Mhm.
wasn't shared in the packet. Yeah, I was going to just respond to Angus about, the zoning and what's the right approach. I mean, what's interesting is, if you make a zoning change in, say, the RN district, it applies, in all of the RN district. And so sometimes Amherst has a lot of zoning districts and they're intricate, and I think they try to respond to the built environment, which I think is a good thing. At the same time, I agree. I feel like, it could be a lot simpler to have like 4 residential zones and 3 commercial village center zones instead of having, VVC and RVC. There's slight differences between them, but then sometimes it's like, well, is it working? And then, our commercial district to me is really outdated. And so I think there's a lot of things to consider. An overlay is, it's a great tool because it leaves in place the base zoning, and because it's serving a certain purpose, you can write in your own, say, standards that are separate from the rest of the bylaw. So you can have your own dimensions, your own definitions, and other things. And so you can really kind of cater it to what you think is important for that overlay. And so what I was going to say when I share my screen with North Amherst is that these properties are mostly non-conforming. So at one point, the town allowed these apartments through special permit. Most of them were special permit, but then the town changed the zoning. This was decades ago. And so these properties are basically stuck, and they couldn't be built today. They can't change really significantly without a special permit. And so to me, part of why, the consultant a number of years ago and why staff looked at it was, how can we allow these properties to change without requiring a special permit? And so, in this framework document, kind of the purpose, we have types of residential uses, permitting process, inclusionary zoning, so kind of bigger topics. And I started kind of filling it in. And I just want to keep it really simple. So if the purpose of the overlay is student rental housing, and also to allow these non-conforming properties to increase units without a special permit, okay. And what kind of residential uses would we allow in the overlay? What's the permitting process? And so to me, it's like if we're saying we want student rental housing, I'm not sure we really need mixed-use buildings. Is it really we just want residential units, and let's actually get residents here, and then we hopefully then can get more people into the North Amherst Village Center, into downtown. I think it would be kind of strange to allow a mixed-use building and have like a pizza shop in the middle of this place when we'd rather maybe encourage people to go to the Mill District. I mean, maybe not. I'm just, permitting process. The idea is a pre-application process, and it's site plan review. And so I think the reality is, if this were in place and a developer came and met these standards in the bylaw, it's really hard to say no. And so, most people won't approach a special permit. Most big developers from outside of town won't actually, put a lot of effort into this knowing it's a special permit and it's discretionary. If it were site plan review and we actually had, even if we had pages of conditions and design standards, to them it signals, wow, the town's willing to do this. I just have to meet all these requirements and conditions. And so, we have inclusionary zoning, we have dimensional standards, we have just general requirements. So we can have building design, site design, open space amenities, pedestrian and vehicular circulation. We could have other kind of buckets or topics. I was just trying to kind of say, okay, what are some big considerations here? And do we just start outlining these? And some of it is, the predictability or flexibility you want in this overlay. For instance, when I look at Puffton, I think, wow, you could actually get new roadways and come up with like a grid layout that has nice density, open space, and all these things. But a developer might come in and just have a completely different idea of how to redevelop that property. And so, what's the planning board or town willing to accept? And so, we can put more in this. I just wanted to kind of, like I said, kind of hit the general themes of what we'd want maybe in this overlay. And really, we have this other document that gets down already into the describing what the apartments are and defining it, number of units, and more things about inclusionary zoning, but just kind of keeping it kind of surface level, like, do we, does this boil it down to the right things? And maybe this is what we, all we need, and we have, a public meeting just quickly for North Amherst. I'm okay with having it just be for North Amherst, and maybe we have a second meeting or another way for the public to comment. I think space could be limited, and if we, depending on how it's coordinated, I mean, it's going to be a public meeting if it's members of the planning board, so it'll be a general public meeting open to the public. And maybe we end up having one or two just to allow, different ideas and comments and folks to come. I think if, if this gets really popular and we have a lot of people, I'd have to consider, like, what's a good meeting room? With the library under construction, we have the large activity room in the Bang Center. We were hoping to get it in North Amherst to make it easier for residents. What's a good space that could be used? It has to be accessible. It'd be great to have parking nearby or near public transit. So maybe we have to have a few meetings just to accommodate the different people who want to comment on this.
All right, Nate, Jesse?
Thanks. Just one more point about this location, as Nate, as you were poking through the different things we might work up a little bit, is that the majority of the lots are far removed from the street. So to me, that leans me more toward allowing flexibility of design, meaning unless you're going into those sites, you're not going to see the majority of what's happening there. And so in my mind, it led me to think it could be a little more flexible and see what developers want to do, as you were expressing it. I don't know if others feel the same way, but both because how long the lots are going east to west, and because the slopes down, there's a significant drop going east to west also. And what hasn't been expressed yet tonight is that the main idea we've been working on is that allowing height to increase as you go east to west, sort of matching the slope of the land. And so again, to me, if a developer has a different view of putting buildings all next to each other, which might not be as attractive as what we would choose for the middle of town, that's okay, as long as it meets whatever other standards we put up, because we're not driving by and seeing it directly. So that's all. Just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. This is the map.
Yep.
And so it could be, right, so right now we have this distance, the setback from the streets, 300 and 400 feet, where we have a height requirement. And maybe these are further back, but we have, some more rigorous design requirements and site plan requirements in these areas closer to the street. And then, right, and then maybe we're not as concerned about the site design in here. And so, with this overlay, we have that ability to define those areas if we want. So to Jesse's point about, maybe we want a certain look along the street, but once we get back in here, it's okay if it has, the developer comes with their own ideas.
All right, Bruce?
Nate, your previous document, what did you call it? A framework,
Right.
framework. Did you have circulation traffic as one of the?
It was the last.
Okay, so so there would be comments there, and there would be there should be B or C that have to do with specifically how we connect housing to the campus. We should be able to put some language in the bylaw in the overlay that speaks directly to basically managing traffic that way by not letting it get onto the roads, not letting vehicles get onto roads. So that would be important. That's a specific question related to the framework here. But generally, I think this is good for us as a committee or as a board, as a generative body. But I think this is too dry for a presentation to local residencies. I think the bullets for the local residents would be descriptive ones about how we imagine the overlay would, what kind of things, what it would generate. And I think that we talk about tripling densities, we talk about building heights, we talk about the setbacks and the staggering. We talk about the affordable housing generation component of it. We talk about wetland respects and things like that. I think that things that that describe what the overlay is intended to produce formally, pretty much, as well as related to circulation and you're right about, you know, whether or not there's we would expect there to be business opportunity, retail opportunities or anything inside there, or specifically not. Of course, general business could be other things. It could have yoga studios and things that wouldn't be allowed in an apartment, but might be very appropriate to have in the core of the of this development. So I certainly think there should be some component for mixed use for that reason. But I think those are the kind of bullets that I was imagining that we would use to describe this to quickly to a local audience.
All right.
So that would be a different document, and I'd be happy to help make that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, this could get filled out. So we are, you know, we did talk about, right, like 3 floors and 6 floors, or, you know, another setback. So we could start, you know, kind of
I agree, but
populating this. I just wanted
this is not the structure to talk to local residents. I don't think I conceive of a different, simpler, more digestible structure for that conversation. This is great for us. I think it is. It's really good for us.
Okay. All right, so Nate and maybe Jesse, do you guys want to talk about this in the housing subcommittee some more? Is that where this is going to get advanced and refined, or should we be expecting you know, a good substantive conversation in our next few meetings of the full board? Jesse.
Yeah, I certainly think we could continue. I feel like, I mean, Nate didn't share the sort of more detailed document we've been working up. So I
Yep.
think we're not so far from something the full board could look at for a longer conversation. Maybe if we have one more subcommittee meeting, we could probably get it there. Do you agree with that, Nate?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the North Amherst counselors thought the meeting could be either later this month or in October. So, you know, I think, you know, I welcome comments from, you know, if you want to, if any board member wants to send me comments on that framework document or any other document in the packet, please do so. And I think we should be thinking about what is a good, you know, in the next 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, what, you know, let's have a meeting in North Amherst or a meeting about this. And so I think, you know, this housing subcommittee can do its work. And I think having ideas for how to, you know, set up that meeting is important. And, you know, there's, you know, like I said, there's things staff can do in terms of online or other ways to collect feedback and, you know, what documents prepare and have ready for everyone.
Okay. Jesse.
So just timeline wise, I've been remiss in my duty of scheduling the next meeting, but I'm hoping the subcommittee will meet next week, assuming we're available. And then maybe for the, I don't know what the agenda is looking like for the 24th. Is that the next planning? No, sorry, 17th.
No.
17th would be the next planning
Yeah.
board. Is there space on that if we have a document ready for us to talk about as a full board?
Nate,
Okay.
Jesse, I'm away all next week.
Okay.
But in terms of the agenda for the 17th, do we have very much on it?
We don't right now.
Okay, so Jesse, there should be room.
Yeah, we can try and get there.
Yeah, yeah.
Bruce, are you back on the 17th for planning board?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, in that case, we will talk more in the next meeting. Time now is 9 o'clock. We'll go on to the next item, old business, topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance. Anything from Pam or Nate? Nope.
No,
Similar for new business?
similar, no,
Similar, okay. Form A and R subdivisions,
also, no.
nothing. All right, ZBA applications.
I'm not aware of any. Nate, are you aware of anything new?
No,
Okay.
it's pretty quiet right now.
All right, SPP, SPR, SUB applications.
We mentioned 363 Main Street, coming, it was Bruno's Pizza, and the idea is that they're converting part of the first floor into a residential unit and shrinking the commercial space. So that's, they submitted an application. It's almost ready to go to a hearing. I think we're looking at October 8th for that, or a meeting in October. Archipelagos continued to September 17th. I'm not sure what's happening there. So, there's that one, the Gould Land application. And then there's Amir Mikchi had done a product down on Southeast Street. I think it's like 133 Southeast Street. It's behind Florence Savings Bank down there on the west side of Southeast Street. It's a 3-story building. It
Yeah.
was done in the last, gosh, I don't know, it's been a few years, but he's proposing to do something across the street. He owns a few properties there. They've applied to the Conservation Commission, and they'll be coming to the Planning Board for that. They might be submitting an application in the next week or so, and that'll go to a hearing probably then in October as well. So it's in the BVC. They're thinking about, having a site plan review and a special permit for some modifications to dimensional standards. And so it'd be a mixed-use building with a number of apartments and parking, and so that's something that would might take a few meetings. They're trying to get trying to get ahead with the Conservation Commission first to determine kind of what the kind of site constraints are, and then they'll come to the Planning Board. But those are 2 upcoming applications.
Okay, great. Planning Board liaison, committee and liaison reports. Bruce, anything from PVPC?
Nope.
All right, Jesse, anything from housing that we haven't touched on?
Nope, you've heard it all.
All right, and Nate, I guess we'll look for a report from Karen on DRB. Until we hear otherwise. Once again, your long serving chair has no report.
Oh,
Bruce.
I just wanted to check on this Saturday, September 20th.
Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure that I think Nate and Pam, this is intended to include you, and I thought Chris would be invited as well, but make sure that that's kosher and all. I think it is, and I I don't know that I've got clear about all of the rest of you, who's coming and who isn't. Can I just go around or just stick your hand up if you and your significant other is and kids if you want can come. There's plenty of outdoor space and ping pong tables and places to go and fly kites and stuff like that.
What if we don't know?
Oh, if you don't know, that's fine. Just tell me.
I held off because I didn't
You
know.
have, yeah. You don't know. Anybody who definitely knows they're not coming, that's probably the way to start. Jesse and Johanna.
Oh,
Okay.
really? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a trip planned to Germany to see my dad, so I'll be.
Oh, you couldn't delay it?
I bought the ticket a few months ago. Forgot when I responded to you.
Okay,
Well,
not
I
Jesse,
mean,
not Johanna, and
I confess that October would be better for me.
would
So I wondered whether, sort of earlier, like almost Columbus Day weekend.
that would That would be fine. I mean, I put that out without thinking anything
Yeah.
other than it would be more likely warmer.
Right.
But early
Yeah.
October is lovely. Yes. So when do we, let me just pull up the calendar in front of me here.
Nice,
Yeah.
Doug, you
And,
invited a party to someone else's house. I like it. At a
yeah.
different time.
Well, the 4th or the 11th,
Yeah, the 11th would be good. I mean, if I get to say
Okay.
my druthers.
yeah. How does the 11th work for Jesse? Are you back, Johanna?
I'll be back, but
Only just.
plans that weekend. But you just shouldn't plan
I
around
know.
life is
Okay, you've 0 for 2. And okay, let's shift it to the 11th. We don't have anything on here, so we can do it. I haven't told my community members yet about this, which is one of the reasons why I want to get clear about who's coming and I mean that the date's good. So I will confirm that it's the date shifts to the same time on Saturday, October 11, and then closer to the time we can check in about who's bringing what, um, or whatever. But
Okay.
that's good. That's it. Thank you, Doug.
All right.
Bruce, what time are you thinking that day?
Oh, I think I said 3 till 6.
3 to
Yeah.
6. Okay.
I think that still works. It'll be getting dark at
That'll give Jara a few weeks to get used to having another child in the house, and he can probably make it.
I was going to
Yeah.
say early October makes it more likely that I'll be able to attend as well.
Okay. Well, that we picked up 3 on that one. That was great. Thanks, Doug. Good. Oh, that's what it is.
Okay. All right. Report of staff. Nate? Pam?
I don't have a report, but Nate, do you have a report?
Not really.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
thanks everyone. I was gonna say, just thanks for, your, working with the ADU amendment. And, the idea is to get this to council. There is an election this November. So the idea is to get this and the inclusionary zoning to them, in time to vote, as well as the housing production plan. And, like I said, staff is considering maybe 2 other zoning amendments that we try to bring to the board pretty quickly. Possibly, we'd have to work with the town manager's office, but if one of them's pretty small, I think the building commissioner mentioned it about shifting some properties to the BN zone along Main Street. But the idea might be to get that soon to the board. We'll see if it moves forward or not, which is, it's, so, with the change in council, oftentimes, if something's going to overlap, we just might wait to bring something forward to the boards. And so, with the time frame, if there's something already started, we try to finish it. There isn't anything necessarily, so I don't know if it can't move quickly, it won't. I will say that the local historic district commission has been studying East Amherst for another local historic district. It's 40 or 50 properties. And so they hired Chris Skelly, who's a consultant. He had worked for Mass Historic. And they've inventoried the properties. They've had their required public hearing. They've done a property owner survey. And will be completing a preliminary study report that they'll probably send to Mass Historic later this month. And as part of that submission to Mass Historic, it's required to come to the planning board for the planning board's review and discussion. And so that might be sometime in October or November, where the board would be asked to review, the idea of a local historic district in East Amherst. And so there's already 2 districts in town, and this would be a 3rd. And so that's something that'll be coming up probably the 2nd meeting in October. I'm assuming I think it might have to be a public hearing. I'll check the regulations, but at least a meeting or 2 to discuss this East Amherst local historic district.
Okay. All right. I don't see any hands. We still have a couple of public attendees, but I don't. Do any of the public attendees want to make a comment before we adjourn? All right, time is 9:10, and I believe we are adjourned. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Pause recording.
Good night, Pam.
Good night, Doug.